Look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, people forget. But God never forgets. I'm going to preach in just about 3 more minutes. The Bible says that watch what happens when you're at your wit's end. When you feel that God has not fulfilled the promise that he spoke it in your life. When you feel like the people who you've been a blessing to have forgotten about you. Watch what God's going to do. And if there was a good dancer in the house, this would be a good place to dance. The Bible says while Mordecai was feeling forgotten, the king had forgotten his love and his kindness. And the reality of it is the king would not even have a kingdom if Mordecai hadn't warned him. There are people in your Rolodex, there are people on your iPhone whose lives you have saved and they never came back and told you thank you. How do you handle seeing you being as righteous as you can, you praying and you fasting, and when you go to your job at the cubicle, you got all kind of scriptures pinned up in your cubicle. They that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. No weapon that is formed against me shall prosper. I'm the head and not the tail, and the lender and not the borrower. But yet you see the unrighteous prospering. You catch the bus every day to work. Somebody else got 2 Lexuses in the driveway and won't drive them to nobody's church. Y'all ain't helping me tonight. How do you handle that? Mordecai felt, somebody say, just like that. Watch this. The Bible says that on the night the king could not sleep. This is the man who owed Mordecai a blessing. 4 chapters have gone by. We're now in chapter 6. He spared the king's life in chapter 2. Now we're in chapter 6 and nothing has been done. But there is an appointed time when God has chosen to wake up everybody that owes you. There is a season that God has predetermined for everybody that should have blessed you, that's sitting on your blessing, sleeping on your blessing, resting on your blessing. There is a prophetic season that God has bringing to pass that they're going to sleep no more. Look at your neighbor and say, sleep no more. God, y'all should have went on in right there. God is about to rustle the sleep of folk that should have blessed you years ago. And God's going to cause them to have restless nights until they remember that there's been a command on your life to be blessed. Elbow your neighbor, say, neighbor, there's a command on my life to be blessed. Can I tell you how God's going to do it? The Bible says, and on the night the king could not sleep, and he commanded to bring the records of the chronicles, and they were read before the king. Bullet point number 2, man may forget, but God has everything written down. Look at your neighbor and say, there's a record about me. There's a file about me. And sooner or later, God's going to open up the file cabinet. And he's going to pull out your file. And he's going to find written in there that when you had 1 chicken, you gave half away. Y'all ain't talking back to me. He's going to find out that you paid your tithes in spite of your bills. And y'all ain't talking back to me. Look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, it's all written down. On the night the king could not sleep, calls for the records, get ready to dance. In it was found that Mordecai had told of the treachery of the chamberlains, the keepers of the door who sought to lay hands on the king. Watch what happens in verse 3. The Bible says, and the king says, can I tell my story? He's reading the record in a restless night. And the Bible says he found in the records that Mordecai had saved his life. He recognized that he wouldn't even have a throne to sit on if it wasn't for Mordecai. Can I pull the bus over for a moment and tell you, how do you handle, I could preach this for a week, how do you handle knowing that you were anointed enough to save somebody else's marriage while your marriage is going chaos? How is it that God can use you to be an instrument to heal somebody else and you sick yourself? How is it that you know that you've been anointed for God to deliver somebody else and you need to be delivered yourself? The Bible says that he understands that he owes Mordecai a blessing. Watch what he does. He says, look at verse 3. And the king says, what honor? I see this. I need to bless Mordecai. And as a matter of fact, I should have blessed him a long time ago. Whew. What honor and dignity have been done to Mordecai for this? Then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, there is nothing done. Watch what the king does. I had to look this up. I didn't know why. Why would the king just not speak a blessing? He's the king. Give him a house. Give him a car. Give him 10 shekels of silver. The king did something that we need to glean from. He recognized, because I should have blessed him years ago, and I owe him a blessing. He said, I don't want to take it upon myself to determine how vast and how broad and how big his blessing ought to be. I know that I owe him a blessing. I should have did it years ago. And rather than coming to a conclusion of how vast his blessing is myself, I need to get a second opinion. Woo! Y'all gonna dance in a minute. He says, I better get a second opinion on how vast his blessing ought to be. Watch what he does. So the king says, who's in the court? Now Haman, and let me help you right there. Haman is the arch enemy of Mordecai. He hates Mordecai so bad that the sight of him throws him into a frenzy. He hated him so bad he went home and told his wife about him every day. I wanted to know, why was this hatred so fueled? Well, Mordecai is of the tribe of the Benjaminites. Haman is of the tribe of the Amalekites. The Amalekites were one of the worst enemies of Israel. Y'all ain't talking back to me. It was Saul, who was a Benjaminite, who went to war with the Amalekites, won the victory, put the king in captivity, and brought back some of the stuff when he was supposed to leave it all. Haman was still mad over the victory that Mordecai's family had got years ago. I want to pause to tell you that some of the attacks that the enemy throws at you ain't got nothing to do with you. He's mad because your grandmother got the victory. Some of y'all are under demonic attack, not because you rubbed the devil the wrong way, but he's still mad that your great-grandfather got saved. Shout yeah. Look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, my attack is bigger than me. He's not concerned about me. He's not mad at just me, but he's mad because my grandmother took my mother to church and showed her the Lord. Shout yeah. Somebody say it's a generational hatred. He hates me because my mama lived for God. And y'all ain't talking back to me. He says, I got to finish this. Watch what God is about to do. He says, I owe him a blessing, and I want to get a second opinion on how vast the blessing ought to be. Are y'all ready to help me? Watch how God strategically sets this thing up. The Bible says